Before we talk about the factories, before we talk about the ships, we need to talk about the ice cream. Because everything that follows, everything, begins here. With a barge. A concrete barge floating in a Pacific harbor, producing 1,500 gallons of ice cream per shift. The United States Navy commissioned it in 1944. It cost approximately $1 million. It carried no guns. It carried no torpedoes. It was not designed to sink anything, to protect anything, to threaten anything. It was designed to produce ice cream. Now consider, at this same moment, in this same ocean, a Japanese soldier on a nameless island who has not seen a supply vessel in 4 months. He is eating roots. He is drinking rain. His ribs press against the inside of his uniform like fingers pushing through cloth. He is not a coward. He is not weak. He is the product of a military tradition of extraordinary ferocity. A tradition that had, only 2 years before, seemed capable of remaking the entire Pacific world in its own image. He has simply run out. Not of courage, never of courage, of everything else. This is the image I want you to hold. The starving soldier and the ice cream barge. Hold them side by side, like two numbers in an equation, and you will understand, truly understand, how the Second World War was won. It was not won at Midway, not at Normandy, not at the Bulge. It was won in a factory in Willow Run, Michigan, at 3 in the morning, by a woman whose name history never bothered to record, tightening a rivet on a B-24 Liberator and moving, without pausing, to the next one. It was won in a shipyard in Richmond, California, where welding torches burned through the Pacific fog until the harbor glowed like a second sunrise. It was won in arithmetic. And the arithmetic this time did not run out. Now let us talk about the Liberty ship. Before the war, building a cargo vessel of moderate size took between 200 and 300 days. Skilled workers, careful assembly, the patient craft of men who had learned their trade from men who had learned it from the sea itself. The Germans knew this. Admiral Donitz had done the arithmetic with cold precision. If his U-boats could sink Allied tonnage faster than Allied yards could replace it, Britain would starve. The arithmetic was correct. It was simply incomplete. Because into this calculation walked a man named Henry Kaiser, who had never built a ship before the war. He had built dams, he had built roads, and he understood something the old shipbuilding guilds never had. A ship is an equation, not a craft, not a tradition. An equation with variables, and variables can be optimized. Kaiser standardized. He prefabricated. He broke the ship into sections built in parallel and craned into place. He put his workers on shifts that did not end. The yard at Richmond breathed like a living thing. In, out, and with every breath, another hull took shape in the fog. And then came the SS Robert E. Peary. November 1942. Richmond, California. The keel was laid on the 8th. The ship was launched on the 12th. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. It is not a beautiful ship. It will not inspire paintings or songs. But a ship is not a weapon. A ship is a promise. A promise that the Sherman tank rolling off the line in Ohio will reach Liverpool before the fuel runs out in the Ardennes. A promise that the ammunition in New Jersey will find the soldier in Normandy before his magazine runs dry. By the end of 1943, American shipyards were launching a new vessel every 10.5 hours. A new ship. A new promise. The U-boat commanders were sinking ships, sinking them at a rate that had been, until Kaiser, genuinely unsurvivable for the Allies. And then, suddenly, they were not sinking them fast enough. The math had flipped. The ocean was filling with American hulls faster than the torpedo could empty it. By the end of the war, American yards had produced 18 million tons of shipping. 18 million tons, made into hulls, made into promises, made into the sinews of an alliance that did not break. We spoke last time of a man in a basement. Paulus understood logistics the way a watchmaker understands a mainspring, every tooth, every gear, every tolerance. He lay awake in his cot doing the arithmetic while the guns roared above him, and the arithmetic always produced the same answer. There is not enough. The watchmaker's philosophy had won in Poland. It had won in France. But it has a single, catastrophic flaw. The watchmaker can only be defeated by the factory. The Americans did not build the best tank. The German Tiger was, by almost every mechanical measure, superior to the Sherman. Thicker armor, more powerful gun, a better machine. The Americans knew this. They built 10 Shermans for every Tiger. The German ordnance bureaus had, by 1944, cataloged over 400 separate types of aircraft, each one optimized, each demanding its own spare parts, its own slice of a manufacturing base already stretched to breaking. The Americans had the P-51, the B-17, the C-47, machines of deliberate, sometimes brutal plainness, designed not for elegance, but for one purpose: to be made, and made again, and made again. Ford's Willow Run plant, a single building, 1 mile long, a quarter-mile wide, built on an empty Michigan field, produced at its peak 1 complete B-24 heavy bomber every 63 minutes. 1 per hour, every day. The Germans called what was happening to them Materialschlacht, the battle of material. They said the word with contempt, as if quantity were a lesser art, as if being overwhelmed by sheer abundance was somehow embarrassing. They were wrong. Quantity, at sufficient scale, becomes its own quality. It stops behaving like a military advantage and starts behaving like a geological force. You do not defeat a river by being braver than it. June 1944. The Allies are ashore, and immediately the logistics men begin to sweat. 28 Allied divisions now operating in France. 28 divisions of men who eat, drink, fire weapons, drive vehicles, require fuel, medicine, ammunition, and the 10,000 other invisible things that stand between an army and a mob. 700 tons of supplies per day, just to exist, not to advance, not to fight, just to breathe. The French railways had been destroyed by Allied bombers before D-Day and by German demolition teams after. The material was piling up on the Norman coast, but the army was 100 miles away, then 200, moving so fast that staff officers' morning maps were wrong by evening. The answer was the Red Ball Express. 6,000 trucks, running on dedicated circuits, roads closed to all other traffic, MPs at every junction. 6,000 trucks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The drivers were, in their majority, Black American soldiers, men whose country had not yet seen fit to grant them full citizenship, whose contribution history would systematically underrecord. They drove until their eyes stopped working, through rain and darkness and German aircraft. Some tied their wrists to the steering wheel so they would not fall asleep and drop their hands. They did not stop, because the arithmetic was simple and relentless. The front stops if the trucks stop. At its peak, the Red Ball Express moved 12,500 tons of supplies every single day. Patton's Third Army was moving so fast it literally outran its fuel. The tanks stopped, not because the Germans stopped them, but because the trucks hadn't arrived yet. And still it moved, because the trucks were always coming. The needle was not just pointing to full. The needle had been pointing to full so long it had broken the glass. Numbers. In 1944 alone, the United States produced 96,000 aircraft, 19,000 tanks, 61,000 artillery pieces, 2 million machine guns, 40 billion rounds of small arms ammunition. The entire German war economy, from the invasion of Poland in 1939 to the surrender in 1945, produced fewer tanks than the United States produced in 1944 alone. 6 years of total war. Fewer tanks than 1 American year. This is not a metaphor. It is arithmetic. Cold and indifferent, the kind that does not respond to willpower or ideology or the fury of a Führer in a bunker. the kind that Friedrich Paulus did in his cellar in Stalingrad while his army died above him. Resources do not care about genius. They do not negotiate with courage. They are simply there, or they are not. Paulus understood this at the end. His fuel gauge had pointed to empty for months. His army had fought with a brilliance the history books do not adequately honor, men fighting for rooms, for stairwells, for individual factory floors, with a discipline that never fully broke, even as everything else did. They died of arithmetic. They died because the needle touched empty, and there was nothing behind it. The Americans reversed the equation. They did not merely fill the tank. They built a tank so large that filling it was never the question. The question was only how fast to pour. The war was not won by a single bullet, not by a single hero or a single decision in a tent somewhere in the dark. It was won by a woman on a night shift in Willow Run who moved without pausing to the next rivet, by a truck driver who tied his wrists to the wheel in the dark of occupied France, by a welder in Richmond who watched a hull slide into the water at 4 in the morning and turned without ceremony to start the next one. Wars are won before they begin, in factories, in shipyards, in the patient, grinding accumulation of more steel, more fuel, more ships, more rounds, until the enemy's generals are doing the arithmetic in a basement somewhere, and the answer is always the same. There is not enough. There was never enough. The Third Reich was a giant on clay feet, brilliant, ferocious, but built on a foundation that could not hold the weight of what it attempted. The clay cracked. The thing fell. America was a different kind of giant, not more brilliant, not more ferocious. In the early years of the war, often less of both, but made of steel. And steel does not run out. Steel does not crack in the cold. Steel does not eat its horses or burn its furniture or wait in a frozen basement for footsteps on the stairs. It did not run out of anything. It had enough to spare. It had enough for ice cream.